Wonderful. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn on getting your business ready for farmers markets in 2022. We are so excited about this session. I'm so glad to see that people are dropping their introductions into the chat. I'm really going to encourage you to continue doing that. It will help me and our other speakers today in knowing who's in the room. So feel free to drop your name, your business name, if you have one, or what you vend, and anything else that brings you here today. Thank you so much. All right, let's head to our next slide. If you do need translation for today's session, please call 202-727-3900. And if you need these resources in any other languages, that is a great number to call as well. Thank you. Next slide. So today we are going to be covering researching and registering for the markets, finding the right farmers market for you, permits and licensing needs, insurance needs, nutrition incentives, thinking about pricing and point of sales for your markets, market booths and displays, marketing and sales tips, and thinking about staffing for your market. It's a lot to cover, so we are going to be moving fast. Please do drop your questions in the chat if you have them, and if you have questions you would prefer to email to our team anonymously, you can email them to inno.ed@dc.gov. You can also send them to any of those of us on the call with InnoEd, and we will send those questions directly, and we will ask them at the end. Wonderful. Next slide, please. So I'm really excited about the people we have speaking today. You've met me, Caroline Howe. I work with the Innovation and Equitable Development team at DSLBD. I'm joined by many colleagues today. Kate, who you met, Cynthia, Shannon, Taylor, and Blake Shar, our InnoEd intern. Thanks for being here, all of you. We will also hear from Joanne Jolly, who's the Produce Plus coordinator at DC Health, and she'll be talking about nutrition incentives to help food businesses at farmers markets. And we'll also be hearing from Market Maven herself, Rylinda Rhodes, the founder and CEO of Maine Roads. We are really excited to also hear the expertise in the room, so please do drop your ideas, your questions, your thoughts into the chat as we're going, and I'll have an opportunity to get some feedback, because this is a lunch and learn both from the InnoEd team, but I'm also really hoping that it can be a learn from all of you in the room as well. Wonderful. Thank you. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So there are as many different kinds of markets in the city as there are kinds of tomatoes. And so we really want to encourage you to think about how you find the right market for you. So what are the things to consider? The first, of course, location. You want to find a location that is both convenient to you and where you're making your products, but also a location that where you will be able to connect with demographics and the size of the audience that you're looking for. So many farmers market managers have a really good sense about the kind of people who come to their market and their interest in the kinds of products that you're selling. The vendor mix. You want to make sure that the vendor mix at the market that you are, where you are selling, is complementary to your products. Market managers often are making these decisions to ensure that there is a good product mix, but it may either be very good for you to be selling at a market where there are 3 other vegan bakers, Michelle, but it also, you may want to be at a market where there aren't a lot of other baked goods. So your baked goods really stand out. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to want to be thinking through. Also related are the requirements. Each farmer's market has a different set of requirements in terms of whether they are just looking for fresh produce, just looking for products made directly in the district, or whether they're open to things designed in the district. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. I also really want to encourage you when you're researching markets to think about the potential of a given market, and the potential of your business to grow based on the market. Markets are not just a point of sale, they are a point of connection. And so if you are connecting with your future customers, whether or not you are making those sales at the market, many vendors that I speak with are making those connections where their biggest sales are then coming for a catering job or a large pickup of those vegan muffins. Again, I'm using Michelle's example because I would love to hear more about what other people are selling in the food and at markets, whether it's food or otherwise. The other reason why I bring up potential is because there are parts of the cities where maybe demographics and the size of attendance at this market is currently small, but you'd be able to bring a lot of your own interested customers. And places where having hot West Indian food to be on sale can actually really bring people to access fresh produce that farmers are selling. So thinking about what the potential is for you and for your community of you being in these markets. Linked here is the Farmers Market website from the Food Policy Council that includes a map of farmers markets in the district. So I am hoping that we can get that in the chat as we continue on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, different markets have different criteria for their vendors. So in addition to finding the market that is, that's the right fit for you, you want to find the market where you are the right fit for them. So many farmers markets range in these particular 4 criteria. So fresh local produce, are they selling just fresh local produce? Or are they also open to both local and sourced food? Some farmers markets are open to the idea of farmers who are selling mostly their own produce, but perhaps produce that is coming from other farms as well to complement. Or if you're selling, you're selling West Indian food that you're making, Steffi, but also potentially selling juices made by a maker farther away. Are those things that the market is open to, or are they restricted to just things that you are making? There are many markets in the city that are producers only, so only things made by the people who are selling them. Some markets allow local prepared foods, so whether that is food for folks to be making at home, like Just AJ's Veggie Dogs, or some markets allow hot foods to be prepared and served at markets. And that did change during COVID, and now we are back to having hot foods at many markets. But that's something else to think about in terms of if that's what you want to be selling, making sure that market is open to you serving hot foods there. So these are some common market criteria for you to be thinking about. And I do know that we also have some market managers on the call. So I'm going to invite you to drop into the chat, market managers, if there's other criteria that are really important for you. Excellent. Next slide. We'll get into some more of that. As I mentioned, thinking about whether your product and how you define your product as locally made versus locally sourced. So things like pickles you might be making directly here in the district. Wine you might be making in the district, but sourcing from grapes from farther afield, or vice versa. You might be growing the grapes, having them processed somewhere else, and really wanting to be selling that way of highlighting your products. Bread, juices, teas, all those kinds of things, thinking about how you would identify your business and how would you distinguish your business in this. Next slide, please. Different markets accept different of these products as well. So things like plants and products from international social entrepreneurs. Many product vendors in the district are sourcing locally from friends or family, internationally, artisans. And so thinking about, will this market accept products that are made internationally? So you want to find the market that will accept those goods. Locally made crafts, if you're making ceramics, that might be seen differently by the market managers, but some markets are really only about food, whereas others are really predominantly about crafts and artisan products. Food adjacent products might be able to enter some markets that are very food focused, that you might be able to make the case that your product is food adjacent, whether that is napkins and dish towels or food themed stationery. So thinking about how you're making the case to markets that are predominantly food focused about your kind of product. Oh, thanks. Thank you so much for some of market managers. Thank you, Megan, for dropping into the chat. Willingness to be optimistic, owning self-promotion and market promotion as part of their workflow. Thank you for that. Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, please. Vendor selection. So just in the same way that you're selecting which markets to apply for, you're also going to want to know that some markets have more competitive applications than others, and that's something to keep in mind. And why to start applying sooner, so that you can also apply to and enter some other markets if ones you're really excited about don't select you for this year. So markets typically select vendors based on product mix. As mentioned, the market vendor may choose to have a certain type of product, more arts, more food than others, and really keeping a balanced mix of what people are looking for when they go to a market. Things like a real balance of coffee and hot food and prepared foods and fresh produce and arts, and thinking about how people might be getting to a market. Whether they are going to be wanting hot food if we're in a location surrounded by restaurants. So market managers and market hosts think about those decisions differently. So know that the decision made may not be about you at all, but about the product mix that they're looking for. Also requirements, some of which I touched on. Presentation, how you're presenting your products and yourself in your business. Different markets have different standards for that kind of presentation. Existing market and demand for your products. How are you promoting your market? How are you building your market? So even if you are currently not selling at any markets and don't have that traction to demonstrate, you can show, I have a really vibrant social media where my followers are enthusiastic and engaged, and I know they're excited to come meet me at your market. That is a really great selling point for you to a market manager. So now this winter is a really good time to start building it if you haven't been focusing on that. So that before you get to the market, you have people who are excited to come see you at that market. The location of the business or entrepreneur. Many markets are really excited about having vendors directly from the neighborhood. So that's something to think about, and to think about looking for the markets really in your neighborhood. And then also potential. Just as Megan said, a willingness to be optimistic, a willingness to promote themselves and their market, that's really part of the potential. What are you going to build? What brand is this business going to build? So that's on sort of selecting the market. The other piece here is, of course, fees and your revenue. So is the market taking a percentage of your sales, as some markets do? Is it a flat fee for you? And depending on your product, how much you're selling, it really is an individual choice. What kind of market setup will be best for you? So will it make more sense for you to be sharing a percentage of your sales with the market, or is a flat fee easier for you to plan for? Are you paying by date? So by week that you attend, or are you paying in advance for the whole season? Those are some things to think about based on the stage of your business. Before we move on to the next section, I'm wondering if anyone has any questions about on this piece before we move on about choosing the right market for you and about how markets are choosing their vendors.
Caroline, I have one question, and if other folks do, I hope they jump in. But I know that participation in markets often means you need to be showing up at the market. Do you know how that sort of plays into the vendor selection, making sure that people will be showing up regularly?
Absolutely. So I think that's a wonderful question. Some markets do have a requirement that you have to be in that you have to be willing to come to every market of the season. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Is that something you're willing to do? Some markets have a rotational system where you might be going every other week and alternating with another vendor, or you might be just going once a month. The Petworth Farmers Market, for example, has one day a month that is specifically focused on artists. So artists and makers are on those days. Oh yes, Donnie, I'm currently at a year-round market. Past 3 weeks, it's been under 20 degrees. Yes, so there are those under 20 degree days in the winter, and then there are are 100+ days in the summer. So thinking about how you can prepare yourself, that's a good question to ask. Is there electricity or electricity connection so that I could bring a space heater? Or am I really prepared to bundle up and be selling at 20 degrees? There are customers who do come out. Is it the same number on a rainy day as a sunny day? No. Is it on the same on a 20 degree as on a 40 or 60 or 80 degree day? No. Those do range. And so markets also, it's good to know about how your market manager thinks about those extreme weather days, what's canceled, what's provided, things like that. And in terms of the maps, I did drop in a link to the DC Food Policy Council's maps, which includes wonderful things, including the farmers market map. And I did see the question about how do you find the applications? Yeah, so it is a really good idea to, when you're looking at that map of farmers markets, to look through at their application process and when those application deadlines are. There's currently no system that is sending automatic alerts in terms of every market in the city's deadlines. But I will say for makers in the district, whether you're making food or you're making art, that is one real benefit of registering with Made in DC. And that my colleague Shannon Taylor runs. And Made in DC does have a list on our DSLBD Eventbrite that you can sign up for alerts of when markets are looking for vendors. That's if we hear from them. And so encouraging market managers to reach out to Made in DC as well. But that is another way to, to sign up. It's also one thing that if you are a vendor and you are going to markets that you like, that you think you would be a good fit at, talk to the manager. Ask who runs this. How did you apply? Feel free to ask the vendors at any given market and about how to attend. And that's, again, a good reason to even if you feel a little marketed out, to go to some other markets, see how they're going, and to make those relationships with other vendors as well. Because sometimes you may find that there is an opportunity to to partner with another vendor. Some markets will allow you to partner and split the cost of a full table in order to be alternating. Or perhaps you and another vendor might choose to split a table so that you can consistently be there, but that you both don't have to be there every weekend. So we'll talk about that a little bit in the staffing section. Thanks for your question, Megan. Those cold days and rainy days build brand trust and recognition of sales. And I think that both from vendors and from customers' perspectives on both sides, you really know who's committed by who's showing up on those days. And that's why many markets do require vendors to come regardless of weather, is because if a customer does come to a market on a cold or rainy day and only see half of the vendors, it's a very disappointing experience. And so I agree that it is really an opportunity to build that brand trust. And I think that in terms of, it is something to think about in terms of, as I mentioned, markets are serving different roles for different people. Ideally, you don't want to be spending money to be at a farmer's market. But again, for some businesses and the brand recognition, brand connection, they've still seen it worthwhile as a marketing tactic to be at a market selling their products, even if between staffing, transportation, and the cost of market fees, that it may cost more. But you really need to do that math for your business, which we'll get to on how to track your costs in a moment. All right, I am going to, pre-sales and market products. Oh, great question. Are there opportunities for entrepreneurs to connect with CSAs in DC to include their products? Great question. There are some CSAs and other programs. So CSAs, which are community supported agriculture, where people pay in advance to get a weekly box. And for example, the Owl's Nest Farm CSA, which is a farm in Maryland, but offers people the opportunity to add on to their share other locally made products, many products that are made in the district. Specifically, they also offer the option of a solidarity box, which is all specifically supporting makers who are BIPOC entrepreneurs. Love these questions coming in. So let us continue on. And we'll talk about pre-sales and market pickups in a moment. So we're transitioning to permits and licensing. To sell any products in the district, you should have a basic business license, a business bank account, and your taxes in place, which is to say have an EIN number from the IRS and fill out the FR 500 with the District Office of Tax and Revenue. The InnoEd team is happy to talk through that process, and DCRA also has one-on-one appointments to discuss how to get your basic business license. But to get your, those are three things that regardless of where you're selling, you should have a basic business license and you should be registered with the Office of Tax and Revenue and have a business bank account. The last two are specifically for food businesses. So if you are, the food business licensing process is distinct and we don't have time to go through it today, but in order to get that food business license, you will need a food manager's license from DC Health, proving that you've taken a food safety and have that food manager's license. So those, again, we do have some more resources if you are just starting your business and don't yet have these licenses. Those are very important for you to get in place. Next slide, please. So insurance, many markets do require you having insurance before either before applying and certainly before attending your first market. So there often are insurance requirements. Typically, those insurance requirements are to have general liability, property damage, and or product liability. And typically, many markets have $1 million as the general amount of your general liability insurance to have. Product liability is particularly for food businesses. And many market managers in the city ask to have the business, the vendor, to list the market operator as an additional insured. So all of these are pretty typical processes. They're not things you can do they're not things that you can do until you know which market you're attending, because you obviously won't know who your additional insured is. Insurance companies typically do not charge more for additional insured. But that is a good thing. As was dropped into the chat, please make sure you are shopping around for insurance. There are lots of options. You want good price and good coverage. Whether or not your market requires it, it is a good idea to have insurance. When you are selling anything at a market, but particularly any food at a market, where again, the risks are higher. So the Farmers Market Association nationwide does have some recommendations to consider for farmers market insurance. As Kate mentioned, do shop around. DSLBD does not and cannot recommend any individual insurance provider. And since I do know that we have some farmers market managers on here as well, I do want to make clear that this is specifically for vendors at markets, and we are really excited that the Food Policy Council and has put together some really great resources for folks who are interested in starting a farmers market. Thanks to Ona for that. And you can find more of that information at the link in the chat. We'll talk more about that a little later too. All right, so moving on from insurance. Next slide, please. We are going to move on to payments. This is the really exciting part of thinking about how you get paid at a market. And it is something to prepare for in advance, because some of these do take a little time to get set up. So you'll see at the top two different kinds of payment systems for accepting credit cards at the market. Cash obviously is still something that is frequently used at farmers markets. Some markets require that you also have an option to take credit cards, and some markets actually have a centralized way for people to be paying by credit card and then getting cash, market cash. As you can see at the bottom left, you'll see Fresh Farms market dollars in purple, and then at the top their Fresh Match, which is for folks who are using their EBT cards, which we will talk about next, because one of the most exciting forms of payments you can take at farmers markets, this is specifically for our food and produce vendors, one of the most exciting kinds of payments you can accept is nutrition incentives. So we're going to come back to some of the other kinds of payment in a moment, but I would like to transition to the next slide. Oops.
And sorry for that. It looks like I'm just going to go hit back on that. It seems to.
Oh yeah, great. Well, there's a link in this slide which goes to the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets had the cash photo. Each of these link to some different resources that you can find. I really liked the Maine Farmers Market Federation has some really good resources on how to handle cash at a farmer's market. There we go. So I'm going to pass this over to Joanne Jolly from DC Health to talk about the farmers market nutrition incentive programs.
everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to be pretty quick. I just want to provide you with the information that you need if you are a food vendor and are interested in taking farmers market nutrition incentives at so farmers market nutrition incentives are monetary incentives, usually in the form of a check or a coupon given to persons receiving federal or local food assistance for use at authorized farmers markets across Washington, D.C. We have several different programs here in the district. The first is the Women, Infants, and Children WIC Farmers Market Nutrition Program. Women, new moms, infants, and children up to the age of 5 enrolled in WIC are eligible for $30 a season in the form of a check to spend on fruits and vegetables at approved farmers markets. If you're interested in learning how your market can get authorized to accept these, please contact Jessie Lupo by email. This is her email address. Oh, can everyone hear me?
It's a little bit low, Joanne, if you're able to get it all closer or speak, or maybe potentially speak a little bit louder. It's just a little low.
Sure, I apologize. Is that better?
It's a lot better. Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. So you see me up close here. The second program I want to talk about our Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program, in which residents who are 60 years and older receive $50 through checks to spend on fruits and vegetables at farmers markets. This, again, if you're interested in learning how your market can get approved to accept these, please contact Jessie Lupo. The next program that provides incentives is our Produce Plus program, which many of you may be familiar with from previous years. However, the model is changing in this upcoming market season, and more details on that will be released as we move forward towards market season June 1st. But I do want to say, if you are interested in either your market accepting Produce Plus, or if you're interested in learning more about how the program is changing and how you can be involved in our community advisory committee, please email Nick at ffm.edu. The next is SNAP benefits. Those are your SNAP EBT benefits. You can be approved to receive those at your market, and those can be used on not just fruits and vegetables, but also a wide range of food items. If you're interested in getting your market approved to accept SNAP, the Department of Human Services manages that program, and this is the website with their contact information here. Next slide. And lastly, we have two matching programs here in the district. The first is Fresh Match, which is managed by Fresh Farm. Persons using their SNAP EBT card at market are eligible for a 1-to-1 match, meaning it kind of doubles their SNAP dollars used at the market. Please contact Nick with that for more information about that. And lastly, Bonus Bucks, which matches federally funded nutrition incentives. And this would be something that you would discuss with your market organization directly. And it's typically also a 1-to-1 match. So in short, if you're interested in learning more about these, I would recommend contacting Jessie Lupo or Nick directly via email, and we can help you get set up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I really appreciate that. So if you, again, to reiterate, if you are interested in, oh, thanks. I really appreciate the chats, and we will follow up with this in the email. But to, Joanne, is there anything you can share about what people, can we go back to the last slide, what people should know about what kinds of products, producers, and vendors are eligible for these farmers market nutrition incentive programs?
Sure, what products are eligible. So each Each incentive program kind of differs with these, but typically it's for purchase on fresh fruits and vegetables and herbs.
Great. Thank you so much. Wonderful. And Joanne's dropped a bunch of other things in the chat. Again, you will get these slides after the end of the presentation. All right. Next slide, please. So in choosing a point of sale, there are many different point of sale options for folks. And those are essentially the systems that are processing your payments for you. So if you're thinking about whether to think about Square or Clover or other systems like that, you want to think about connectivity. Does your market have good cell service? Will you have good cell service at that market? What kind of devices do you want to have on you? How are you going to be moving to and from the market? Some markets you have to walk your products in. Some markets you're able to park very close to your location to unload. So thinking about what kind of device you want to be able to have at the market to process payment. Transaction fees. What is the system of transaction fees? Any point of sale has some transaction fee for taking credit cards, and even the point of sale systems that are processing, some that process EBT cards actually will also process credit cards, but may charge you those transaction fees on the credit cards. Accessing multiple types of payment. Do you want a point of sale system that will allow you, for example, to accept EBT, to accept cash? In what way will it help you track sales? We're going to talk more about that on the next slide, but the point of sale system that is right for you will depend on your particular needs and what you anticipate for future needs. Next slide, please. These are some myths on the left, and on the right, some better practices. So I often hear from vendors, and again, in my experience as a vendor, I have believed in these myths myself in the past, such as that you can just count your cash before and after market and you'll know how much you made. I see Rylinda shaking her head to that. Yes, to track sales and know what's actually selling, some kind of point of sale tracking is helpful. Whether you're using your same device or the same platform to track sales, something like Square or something like, or even if it's just a clipboard to track what you're selling, it is so important to know what you're selling. And it is so important to keep if you are handling cash, your cash box separate from your own personal wallet. This is, again, the importance of having a business bank account and a personal bank account when you're at market, having personal cash and business cash, essential to keep separate. Whether you are working for someone else or you are the business owner, you have to keep those separate. Another myth that customers will pay however you process payments. And in reality, customers will pay with what they use. So some people will show up to market without any cash, depending on your market. Some people will show up to a market with only cash. So really being prepared for a diversity of payment types and thinking what you're willing to accept, what you want to default and encourage people to do, and check with your market, again, to see what they do and what you'll need to do. Again, some markets have a place where people can process credit cards upfront and receive a specific market money to use with vendors. Others will accept, the market will accept Venmo and they'll give people that cash to then use in the market. So thinking about how you want to operate and what your market can do for you. That's another reason to not just count your cash in the cash box before and after market. If you're taking credit card payments, if you are willing to accept Venmo payments, if you are willing to accept Cash App or Zelle or any of those other things, making sure you're tracking all of that, because the last myth is that taking cash or by using any of these apps of Zelle or Venmo or Cash App means you won't pay taxes on sales. All income should be tracked and is taxed like other revenue. It is true that cash and apps may not have processing fees, which again, credit card machines do. That's why so many market vendors really encourage people to use cash. It's not so that they can keep it all under the table. It's so that they're not paying those processing fees. If you're buying $2 worth of a product and paying 25 to 50 cents in a processing fee, that sale and your margin has just disappeared. So keeping that in mind. So I think these are some myths I wanted to raise, but if you have other questions about that, oh yes, and it is also the major apps like Venmo and Cash App are going to be are now reporting transactions above $600. Yes, next slide, please. This is we've talked about this. Make sure that you are in touch with DC Health and the Produce Plus team to get certified for farmers market nutrition programs. If you are selling fresh produce, there are particular criteria for your farm that it is worth to make sure you're aware of. Next slide, please. So an engaged customer is a loyal customer, and an engaged vendor creates engaged customers. So I am so excited to have one of the most engaging vendors I have ever met, Miss Rylinda Rhodes, to tell us a little bit about how you keep your customers engaged. So I'm going to spotlight you and invite you to unmute.
Good morning and happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm sorry, happy Wednesday, everybody. It's so important to engage people, whether I'm a vendor or not. That's just naturally who I am. I am a humanitarian. I love people. So when I'm at markets, I don't let not one person walk past my table without greeting them in some type of manner and, saying hello and asking them how are they doing, and then offering the opportunity to introduce them to main roads. And whether they purchase a product from me or not, I always leave them with a takeaway message, something inspiring that they can use for themselves. So even if they don't purchase today, they will remember me, and maybe the next time they will purchase. But it's not just about selling my products. I'm literally a humanitarian. I love people and I want the world to be better. So I engage them because I want them to know that they matter as well as I matter. And not only that, it just bridges a community. There's so much negative energy in the world, and I want people to know each other. Just because we look different or we come from different places, we can all get to know one another. We can step out of our comfort zone and learn about one another just by a simple hello. So I don't let not one person walk past my table without some form of introduction.
Amazing. And I have seen Rylinda in action at markets, and it is 100% true. And that when I say that an engaged customer means an engaged customer is a loyal customer, someone who feels like they like their vendors. That's one of the things that surveys have shown about these markets. People come to markets because they want to be connecting with the people who are making their products. They want to be connecting with you. And it is so important to make sure that you are starting and making that connection, and that you are communicating how much you care about them as individuals. So Rylinda is an incredible vendor. And yeah, what else?
And one other thing that I do when I'm at the market, I get a chance to see other tables. So if someone is asking about something that I don't have, I refer them to another vendor.
That's amazing. So I'm going to circle back to Rylinda after I share some of our best tips, because she's really touched on the two most important ones. Can I ask Kate, thanks Rylinda, if you're able to start sharing again? Wonderful. Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, wonderful. So engaging your customers, as Rylinda said, most important at market, everyone who walks by, but you can start engaging customers before your market even starts. Use that social media, use email lists, texts. I love when my vendors send me an email of what to expect at the market. Why should I go? Takes us to this next side of thinking about consistency and creativity. I want to go and see vendors who have the same product that I love available, but I also want to see that creativity. And so whether you are selling produce and have a new product for me to try, or you're selling soap like Main Roads and have both my favorite bar as well as something new to try, that's how you're going to keep those loyal customers consistently buying from you, rather than just buying once, loving that product, and never coming back. So balancing consistency and creativity. And now is the time to start thinking about how you're going to do that over the market season with your product mix. And Rylinda said this perfectly, creating those partnerships, lifting other vendors up. That can be at your table if it's a vendor that's not at that given market. Is there another local business whose product you can showcase? If you only have one product that you're selling, is there another partner whose product can add that creativity to you every week? As mentioned, Owl's Nest, which is a farm that grows flowers and produce, has these other products of honey and hot sauce and ceramics from other vendors that they bring in to showcase, so that they're lifting those other vendors up and partnering on the other side. So when the ceramicist is selling her vases, she's selling Owl's Nest flowers too. And as Kate dropped into the chat, amazing bartering relationships with other vendors. Those partnerships with your other vendors at market are so important. And one of the most magical things about working a farmer's market is indeed giving a loaf of bread to one farmer and getting a bag of veggies back, or a bar of soap for some of that cool hot sauce. And that's what's going to be incredible for you, and to build those partnerships to go together to other markets. And to Rylinda's point, some markets aren't even application based, and we're encouraging more and more markets to make sure that they are having applications to increase equity and creating equitable application processes. But so much is by word of mouth. So the more other vendors you know, the more likely you will hear about them. Next slide, please. Because then engaging customers at market, as Rylinda said, attention, capturing their attention, making that connection, saying hello, understanding what they need, providing both verbal and visual information about your brand. Whether that is a banner for your table, signs around your table telling what products are, but also engaging the customer verbally in that way. Other sensory information. Of course, if you have soaps or teas, it's great for people to be able to smell them. What can your table offer? If you're selling hand towels, what are other senses you can engage? The sense of texture of your products, but maybe it is having some tea on your table to draw people in. And at market, lifting those other vendors up again, that you can send people to. Oh, you want something to try with this? This goes so well with that cheese at that next place. Next slide. Neighbors DC is a market that is not a farmer's market, but is a pop-up market that started this year and has been running all year, specifically focused on BIPOC and female entrepreneurs. These photos, they take fabulous photos, but it's also because their vendors are very engaging. And we're going to start to talk a little bit more about how to keep an engaging table. So a successful vendor is both engaged, attentive, but also engaging. So engaging those customers in conversation, providing information, and active. I cannot tell you enough how much these devices, our phones, that are so critical in so many ways, can be an absolute drain on your engagement and your attentiveness to potential vendors. Next slide, please. So actually thinking about how you're presenting your products matters a lot. And there are so many creative ways to do it. But as this picture shows, and some of the pictures on the next slide, height, creating height in your table is super important. Next slide, please. So how are you designing your table in a way that's consistent with your brand? So if you want to create a very farm vibe, is it baskets? Is it burlap? Is it, what are the crates? How do you use what you're transporting your products in to actually flip over and become something that's creating that height on your table? How are you balancing color? Again, this can be a way to bring in some of those other partners. Find that florist at the market and make sure you're getting some of their flowers at the start of the market. How do you keep your table colorful, visually enticing? I love that Kate said, you know, if you have branded gear, it can help people find you, know you, and making sure that you're really keeping that visual throughout the day. Next slide, please. Thinking about how you're presenting, again, both verbally and visually, some of the important identities of you and your brand. So is your product locally grown or locally made? Are you a certified made in DC business? That's down at the bottom left. And I'm going to drop into the chat for you to visit thisismadeindc.com to make sure that you can register if you are a local maker. Are you organic? Is your, you know, if thinking about how you communicate, fresh from the farm, homemade, district maker, whatever these are, making sure that you're communicating it. Next slide, please. Staffing. There are so many ways to find staff for your market. Ideally, if you are a very small business, it will probably be you. And I will tell you that as a maker or any entrepreneur, having you at the table makes such a difference, especially in your first couple years at market. It is, I can't tell you enough how much when I was running my business, just how much that time at market, interacting with customers, getting their feedback was so important for me to make sure my products, my services were meeting those customer needs. And if it cannot be you for any reason, whether that's 1 week or the whole season, or if you're ready to go to multiple markets, having other staff at other markets is obviously important. So making sure that you're clear to your staff. Staff have to stay engaged. Cell phones are almost always in competition with engagement on both sides. Your customers are on their phones. If your staff are on their phones too, you will not get that connection. Make sure your staff have some basic information about your company, whether it's someone you're hiring for the whole season and have the time to train, but even if it's a last minute TaskRabbit hire to staff your market table, make sure they know something about your business, a fact sheet about your business that they should read through beforehand to answer basic questions. I will say that as a customer of many local businesses who always has questions for businesses, including sometimes songs that I've created for businesses when I've come across staff who actually have really nothing to do with the business. It is both embarrassing to perform a song about a local business to someone who knows nothing about a business. So I will just say it's so important for them to be able to answer basic questions about your business and direct people, hey, I don't know that, but here's the email. Empowered. Let your market staff know the decisions they can and cannot make without checking in. If someone comes back with a return, if someone is unhappy, what power do they have to be able to say, hey, I'm so sad you didn't enjoy that last week. Why don't you try today's flavor? Because we really want to make you happy. That's half off or that's free. Can they do that? If someone really wants to try something and you don't have another open bottle to sample, are they available to open another if you've told them, hey, just sample 2 bottles at market? Your staff need to know, or they need to know these are the questions you need to check in with me first on. and if you want to find great staff at markets who stick with you year to year, you have to find a way to go beyond seasonal. Is that a partnership where staff who work your markets are then working this other restaurant during the winter? Are there connections you can make? Again, why it's great to know other vendors, to know at certain times of year the businesses that are really looking to hire off season. Staffing is such a challenge right now in every industry. So making sure that you have a reason to get people really excited to work for you on market days is really important. Next slide, please. So we've covered so much. We've got a few minutes left for questions, but any other questions you have, if you want to talk more about any part of this, encourage you set up an appointment with us at our bit.ly/inno_booking. We're happy to dig into any of these topics in more detail. Visit our website, send us an email at inno.ed@dc.gov, or find us on the interwebs at SmallBizDC for DSLBD and at This is Made in DC for Made in DC. Again, feel free to drop any questions you have in our last couple minutes into the chat and we'll try to get to them. And then I'm going to invite our call-in users to unmute in case you have a question.
Caroline, while you're unmuting, there was a question in the chat earlier that we answered, but I thought might be helpful for you to speak to. Someone was asking about markets, specifically are vendors from other states represented in the DC markets?
Great question. Yeah, many district market, all farmers markets have produce. I can't say all, almost all farmers markets have produce coming from outside of the district because there are so many more farms outside of our district borders than just inside. And those that are selling food only grown in the district are often looking for other kinds of vendors. Again, the requirements are market to market, but to my knowledge, there are the majority of markets do accept applications from DC, from Virginia or Maryland. So if you are right over the border, certainly encourage you to look at selling at markets in DC. There are also incredible markets in Virginia and Maryland as well to sell at. And I think that there are some real benefits about tying into some of that state pride, but certainly district residents are also purchasing at markets in Northern Virginia and Southern Maryland as well. I have asked our phone users to unmute if they have any questions. But otherwise, I'm going to encourage you to send your questions to inno.ed@dc.gov. I want to thank Rylinda so much for joining us, as well as Joanne Jolly from DC Health, all of my team, the Innovation and Equitable Development team at DSLBD, and to all of you for joining, the market managers, the future vendors, and current vendors. I'm so glad that you joined us today. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop our recording.